Hi there, and thank you for tuning in. I'm Shauna K. Lester, the founder of Memorable Essay and creator of the IMG Residency Match Application Accelerator. We'll be talking some more about that, but for now, just introducing myself and getting started today. So I want you to, if you're tuned into this, to hit share so that somebody who's interviewing for Match is able to see this conversation that we're going to have today. Somebody can learn a lot from it in terms of what they need to do for their interview that's coming up, because the interviews are very important. Every stage of this process is very important. So now you've gone through the application phase and you're interviewing, it's time to be really sharp for your interview. So this is actually one of my favorite topics to talk about because a lot of people just don't know about it. So whenever I can make people aware of something that they have never thought of before, that's a good thing. So we're going to jump into it today. And so the main focus of this is what you should focus on. That's where our conversation is going to go. And so what I find oftentimes, even this year, is that especially if you're a higher achieving sort of person, which you need to be to actually see through this process, when it comes time to prepare for your interview, you do the best that you can in terms of running through all the possible questions that you can get. And that's really great. I mean, obviously that's the responsible thing to do because, if you prepare well, the interview should not be the first time. I've said that before. If you watch my videos, you would have heard the interview should not be the first time that you're answering most of the questions that you get. Like maybe one or two questions should be new to you, but most of them you should have already answered those questions in your preparation. So in a sense, you do want to sort of run the gauntlet in terms of answering all the questions. Hey, Akoli, answering all of the questions that you can, but it will be impossible to prepare for every single question. So we're going to talk about what to focus on instead. The best way to explain this is with an analogy. When I was thinking about it, is that I think most of us, if we try, we can remember a really special day in our lives, perhaps from when you were a child. I know for me, it was the day I got into high school. It was after a field trip, and I found out the high school that I would be attending, and I was really elated because I had sort of looked up to the young women who went to that school, looked up to them for a really long time. And so I was so excited that I was going to get to be one of them and to wear the uniform. But if you ask me, I actually do not remember everything about that day, right? So if you can stop and you can, feel free to share in the comments, whether you're watching live or watching on the replay, if you can share, yourself based on your background, what's a day from your childhood that you really remember because it just makes you feel so wonderful inside. Chances are that you do not remember all of the details from that day, right? Your brain just has not held on to all of those memories. Even if you're a big writer or a journal person and you wrote them down, you do not remember every single thing. But what you do remember is the overall feeling that that day gave to you. And that's something that you want to focus on as you prepare for your interview. And the way that you do that is through messaging, all right? So the thing with messaging work is that it's really important, but lots of people don't necessarily understand how important it is or how it works. But it's the way that I do all of my works, especially with IMGs, because it's so important. So if you did your personal statement well and you did your application well, this should be pretty easy for you because actually most of your messaging for your interviews is something that you should go back to your application and pull out of your application. And so what I mean by that is that when you sit down and you think, tell me about yourself, what are your strengths, what is your weakness, why have you chosen this specialty, what do you have to give to our particular program, those are all questions that should have been answered in a good and robust personal statement, and you can just kind of take them out and tailor them for the program, right? If you're not in that boat, at least make sure that you have answers to those basic questions going into the interview. But what I find is that a lot of people, they get the interview invitation, they choose their date, and so they start now with, okay, I'm going to make all these new responses. I'm going to make all these new responses that sound very official and they sound very tailored, and somehow these are going to make me match. But the problem with that, and it's something that is very subtle where if you're not aware of it, you just won't think of it, is an issue with the consistency of responses. And so what that means is that you meet somebody today and they say that they like this thing or they're motivated for this reason, and the next time that you meet them, all of that messaging is gone, right? So yesterday they really loved, you know, internal medicine because it helps them to figure out things, and they like the intellectual challenge of that. And tomorrow you meet them and they love internal medicine because it gives them a chance to serve. And I mean, obviously you would have more than one reason, but I'm just saying, if the reasons that you present in writing are different from the reasons that you present when you speak, that is communicating a problem in terms of you are inconsistent with your responses. And whenever people are inconsistent, that just makes you less believable, right? None of us like inconsistent people. So what you want to do is to go back to that application and to pick out those responses and to tailor them. And as I'm saying, if the way you wrote made it so that they were missing from the application, you have to come up with them from scratch. All right. So what you want is to think about, what are the overall things about yourself that you want to communicate. So we had spoken about this in an earlier video, that whenever anyone is evaluating you for a match, they're wondering if you are actually qualified to be there, qualified to join their team, if you are going to like being a part of their team and being, you know, really like doing all of the work that goes into residency, right? And they're also wondering if they're going to enjoy working with you, right? Because it's a pain to work with anybody who is going to slack off, is going to be a fuss, is going to disrupt the program, or, you know, worse, is going to bring harm to a patient or something. So those are all of the questions that you need to be answering as you go through your responses, right? Ensure that every single one of the responses that you prepare is an answer to one of those questions or to one of those fairs that you want, whatever you want to call it. Make sure that all of your responses answers one of those things. So on top of that, in terms of you focusing on that and the messaging that you're conveying, you want to think of some other things that you want to come across, that you want to put across to people. For instance, are you somebody who you can handle pressure? That might be one of your responses, but just in general, being a physician in a residency training program, you need to be able to work under pressure. You need to be able to think on your feet. You need to be able to listen to people, to listen to what you're asked, and to respond to what you're asked. You need to be somebody who is a positive person. You have a positive disposition, you know, no matter how tough things are, or you're flexible. You know, that's another big one in terms of you expected to interview and find X, but you come and find Y. Are you complaining? You know, do you look stressed, or can you just kind of go with the flow of how the day is going? Are you somebody who is compassionate? That's something that came up recently in a session I had with someone, where the response that the person gave just, you know, it would have set off red flags about, are you somebody who is compassionate? Because what you want is, when we spoke about that day that was special in your life, that you maybe do not remember all the details, but you really just remember how you felt on that day and it was a good feeling, is that you want to have these individual responses that stand out, but you also want to leave people with an overall positive feeling, confidence in your ability, confidence in your enthusiasm. So one of the ways that I actually got started in the world of interviewing is in college interviews. And I always tell people that there are two people who I remember interviewing who I cannot forget. And both of them, actually, it was in different ways, but their enthusiasm for the opportunity is what I remembered. So it's like, if you ask me today, I cannot tell you what they said, but there was one person who legitimately, every time she gave a response about a certain question that meant she would have the opportunity, her whole body lit up. It wasn't just her face, it was her whole body. She was so excited that I thought to myself, and I mean, obviously she was qualified for the opportunity because she was there and she was interviewing, and I just kept thinking to myself, how could I ever say no to her, right? So it's sort of like in that write-up, you're like, you know, we must get this one, here's this, here's that. But on top of it, her enthusiasm just came through so strongly. So you want to think about, what is that feeling that you want people to be left with when you leave the room, and how can you communicate that through your messaging? So my last point that I will say about that is that in the rank of questions, there are certain questions that, you know, they're staples. You're going to get them at some point, especially if you have more than one interview. You're going to get them along your interview trail this year. So we had spoken about those. Tell me about yourself, strengths, weakness, you know, difficult patient, these sorts of things. But the most important question that you will be asked, right? And messaging is highly involved in this particular question, so I wrote it down for you. is, what are your questions for me, right? So you are going to be asked that question. I mean, unless something happens where there's just absolutely no time left for your interview, but more than likely you are going to receive that question. It's possible for you to receive that question first in terms of in the list of all of the questions that you get. So you really want to be prepared to respond to that question. And there is messaging that is communicated in that response. Do you have any questions? No. Just think about it. What is the messaging that communicates? Are you not interested? Did you not prepare? What is that communicating about you? So even if you have very stellar responses to all of the other questions, if your response to do you have any questions for me is no, people are going to think, is this person not curious? Are they not interested? Are they not giddy? Do they not want to be a part of this team? If your response to that question is, I had some questions, but most of them have already been answered, what's the messaging there? What are you communicating? Did you have so few questions that all of them have already been answered? Again, the messaging is also that probably you're just not that interested, because the opportunity to talk with each person, the opportunity to talk to a resident is a great opportunity. The opportunity to talk with a fellow, to talk with somebody who is in charge of the program, somebody who would teach you. You're not interested in them. You're not interested in their research. You're not interested in anything that you've seen since you've been around. So the messaging of your response to, do you have any questions for us? Very important, because even if you've gone through interviewing with really amazing responses to all of the other questions and you sort of leave a bad taste in the person's mouth with no questions, that doesn't really, do well for you, or it doesn't represent you very well in terms of when people are thinking about that day or that time when they met you and how you made them feel. All right, so those were my tips to you today. And in terms of just putting yourself together whenever, now we're in interview season, going through till January. Also, some of you who are watching this are actually going to be getting ready for March 2021. So putting together your application, you really want to think about, beyond the scores, beyond sort of doing all of the other things that would ready you up, or get you ready, your volunteer opportunities, your extracurriculars, and so on. You really want to start thinking of your application not in terms of these single documents and single events. So not this is a personal statement, this is a CV, this is a letter of recommendation, this is an MSPE, this is my interview response number 1 and interview response number 2. It's all one thing, and the primary thing that you're leading with is your messaging. That's what I focus on when I work with my clients, and that's what I want you to focus on as well. Messaging that communicates that you're qualified for the opportunity, that people are going to love working with you, and that you're going to love doing the work, and overall just any positive adjective you can think of that would be important in that setting. You want that to be a part of your messaging. You're composed, you're professional, you think well on your feet, you're prepared, you're interested, you're deeply interested. You know how to engage someone in conversation, meaning that you not just talk, but you also listen. All right. So as you prepare for your interviews, be sure to focus on your messaging. Go ahead and click the link below to join the Facebook group, the IMG Residency Match Application Accelerator Facebook group. You're going to be hearing a lot more in the weeks to come. So definitely, don't miss out on that. So click the link below and join the group. And until next time, we'll talk. Take care. Bye.